Hi everyone and welcome. Glad to see you here in this long roundtable on longevity, tech, investments, and what's next. If this is your first DHI roundtable, here's a bit of how it works. Digital Health Insider is a weekly newsletter. Well, it started as a weekly newsletter covering the top news in health tech, and it evolved into a community that hosts roundtables, interviews, listicles, and a bunch of content. These roundtables happen every couple of months, and the idea is to bring together experts to unpack some big topics. So this time it's longevity. We haven't stopped hearing about longevity in the past few months. It's a very hot topic, and it's really reshaping how we think about health, aging, and the future of care. So it has become every time more clear that it's a big opportunity for founders, investors, clinicians, and people that just want to live a better and longer life. Our goal is to explore longevity from a business perspective today. So we'll dive into what's hype, what's real, what's actually working for founders that are on the ground now, and where the field is headed. I'll do a quick rundown through the agenda. We'll cover what longevity actually means, how founders are building and scaling the space, the role of AI and digital health, what investors are betting on, and peek into what's next and some Q&A. If you have questions, feel free to drop them and we'll respond by the end. We have 1 hour. Max, you're there. Hey. So let's get going. We have amazing speakers, so I'll stop talking and we'll let the smart people introduce themselves. Nate, do you want to start?
Yeah, smart person. I'm not sure about that one, but I'm doing my best. Yeah, Nate Graville, co-founder and CEO here at Geviti. Health optimization platform, obviously centered around longevity, bringing advanced diagnostics to people's homes, various treatment modalities that are finally becoming more popular. Everything as it relates to longevity, supplementation, et cetera. What we do different is we built some really cool, sophisticated artificial intelligence and machine learning technology to really help drive patient outcomes. So backgrounds in technology, not in medicine. What brought me here was personal loss, which we'll probably get into. But yeah, that's some context on myself and Geviti.
Thanks, Nate. Who wants to go next?
I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Hilary Lynn. So my background comes from medicine. I'm internal medicine board certified. Spent the earliest part of my career in academic medicine. I was at Stanford for over a decade and at Columbia, and entered the health tech innovation space due to my frustration with the traditional healthcare system. So ElevateX is my second VC-backed startup. The first was in the field of mental health curio, and had a lot of very interesting learnings just having that journey, and went from being a direct-to-consumer founder, and now we are enabling clinics and health systems with ElevateX. So what we do is we're an AI-powered platform enabling the transformation from the reactive sick care system to a much more proactive true healthcare system. And what we do is we offer the technology solutions as well as the services around planning that sort of transformation for organizations as small as solo practitioner clinics to as large as health systems.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Max, co-founder of Superpower. I believe that the most important thing in existence is existence, right? So extending and enhancing human life. And that's what we try to do at Superpower. Build a healthcare system focused on preventing disease and enhancing human capabilities. And it's our belief that 5 years from now, the primary way people interface with health is going to be via an AI doctor. And everyone will be empowered to understand their health via an AI doctor that understands everything about them.
Thanks all. As for me, I'm head of growth at Lighted. We're a digital product agency specializing in healthcare. So we basically partner with companies across all the healthcare industry and help them build innovative solutions from strategy, consulting, design, and development. So that's all. Let's get started. And I want to start with definitions. So Hillary, perhaps you can help me. What actually is longevity in today's world? Is it about living longer or living better? What would you say is the definition?
This is an amazing question to start with because coming from a more scientific medical background, longevity doesn't have a traditional definition. It really is, in my mind, a philosophy. It's the approach towards healthcare and wellness and everything in between to prolong not only your longevity, your lifespan, I mean, but also your health span. So that optimization of health from a preventative, proactive manner is what longevity alludes to. But I like the question because it's very difficult to translate that to a medical community because a lot of people in medicine are scratching their heads like, what does it mean? Is it a specialty? I wouldn't say it is a specialty. Many practitioners from many different specialties will practice in a longevity fashion, but I'll leave it there.
We'll get into that, into how also the more traditional healthcare can integrate longevity into their practice. But first, I'd like to dive into why healthcare is still primarily reactive, despite the 4.5 trillion spent annually, and 90% of that going towards chronic conditions that could be prevented through precision longevity. What's your take there? Why do you think it's like that?
It's incentive systems, unfortunately, and we are the products of many decades of incentive systems that have developed very mature entities. And by that, I mean everything from big pharma to insurance companies, to health systems, to, even at some point, doctors were, as a community, part of this revolution or this evolvement into what we have today, which is this reactive sick care system. And the short answer of that is we currently pay for resolution of short-term problems. And that is the way we have developed the healthcare system. So until we turn around that perspective and actually view prevention as a viable and worthy goal, we will not be able to pull away from sick care medicine.
How would you define precision longevity and how it's different from preventive care? And why is this distinction so important for both patients and providers?
Yeah, I love using the phrase precision longevity because longevity means, like I mentioned, so many things to different people. And a lot of folks have started to equate longevity to wellness and biohacking, which, that might be it for certain folks. But the way we see it is precision longevity means highly individualized, data-backed care, essentially. And so it's not just feeling good, that is important. It's not just a certain sort of branding that makes things feel more concierge. It really is that focus on precision or data that is unique to a particular individual and creating a very unique, customized care plan for them.
Awesome. Now, stepping back a bit, there are a lot of reasons why building for longevity is challenging. And one of and I'd say the biggest challenge is the current healthcare landscape itself. So to all of you, from your experience, what are the biggest gaps or limitations in today's healthcare system that make it hard to advance longevity-focused care?
Yeah, I'll jump into that real quick. I mean, goodness, just decades of bureaucratic nonsense that has been added and piled onto our state statutes and our federal statutes, just decades of now very outdated stuff that's just been added there that we, unfortunately, today in a more modern society still are forced to deal with and try to push through. I mean, trying to work with any of the federal entities, the DEA, it's like, it's a nightmare. And it doesn't have to be this way, which is really frustrating. It's really, really hard to to sort of dial back what has just been piled onto for so long. And when navigating the state statutes and the federal statutes, I'm sure all of us would agree, is just a pain point that unfortunately we don't see getting any easier. In fact, honestly, it's getting more costly. And so I'd say for us, that's the biggest thing. You can build, you can build amazing technology, and build a distribution channel to get care to people. That stuff's relatively easy to do. It's hard to do it well, but you can do that. It's very challenging to navigate the state statutes and the federal statutes and do it completely above board everywhere.
Nate, you've seen firsthand how patients are like increasingly looking for longevity focused products and solutions. How do you think this shift is impacting traditional healthcare? If you think it is impacting it at all.
Oh, no, for sure. I mean, there's a huge consumer shift towards longevity products. Yeah, I think the pandemic, COVID, created this heightened awareness for health vulnerability and mortality, frankly. I think this has led to consumers taking a more proactive approach to their health, which is, super awesome. And, political views aside, there is a movement right now called Make America Healthy Again, whether you like the person who's sort of spearheading that or not. This is gaining traction towards our space. This is sort of getting people to start viewing things through more of a proactive and preventative lens, which ultimately is a good thing. And so I also think people are starting to recognize that there's limitations to reactive healthcare. And it's not your primary care physician who owns your health. It's you who owns your health. At the end of the day, they're not the ones walking in your body. They're not the ones walking in your shoes. You are. And so you have to take ownership of that. And to do so, you have to be extremely proactive and preventative. And I think each of these panelists, myself included, are building solutions that allow you to do that. Things that mesh seamlessly into your life. But also what we're noticing as well is there's a lot of anecdotes about individuals who have sort of healed things, whether it's autoimmune or otherwise, through a more holistic approach that's not necessarily considered modern medicine. And that's super interesting. So, there might not be many long-term studies to support a lot of these anecdotes that are being expressed, but you've got to take into account that a lot of people are saying very similar things about, whether it's a supplement intervention or a type of diet or a peptide or whatever that might be. So there's no doubt this rising consumer interest in finding out the root cause as well, rather than just sort of treating symptoms, which ultimately, obviously, we would all agree is a really, really good thing. Reactive sick care it's kind of a path to death, unfortunately. I know that sounds pretty bold, but
dramatic.
Yeah, it might sound dramatic, but it's certainly, and yeah, it's there to keep you alive if something, crazy happens. And I get that. That's, we don't want to diminish traditional medicine, reactive care, but we're pumping so much money into reactive care, not enough money into proactive care. It just seems almost counterintuitive at this point. I think they're doing a $2 billion extension at the Mayo Clinic here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it's like, we were talking about that here at the office the other day. What if we were to take that $2 billion and invest it in people to prevent them from getting sick in the first place? And there's just not enough of that out there. And, we're super thankful for these panelists because we're bringing altruism back to healthcare. It's much more difficult to profit off of healthy people, frankly, than it is off of sick people. And honestly, that's what it comes down to. And it's unfortunate, it's sad, but there's also an interesting statistic. I mean, just to validate that there actually is this increased shift towards, consumer spending towards longevity and digital health platforms. So I think it was the stat is 2015, there were about 82 million units of wearable devices, Apple Watch or rings, Fitbits, Whoops, those sort of things. In 2025, there's projected to be closer to 600 million. So there is that's a 620% increase in shipments coming in for wearable devices. And that's just astronomical. That's a huge figure. So there's an obvious demand, but what's super interesting is it's actually being driven by, we're finding, millennials and Gen Z particularly. So they're viewing health optimization as an investment rather than an expense. And that is a really, really cool thing to see.
Yeah. And Hillary, I would love to get your input here. How as an MD, how do you personally separate evidence-based interventions from the fluff? As Nate was just saying.
I know it's such a hard thing, and I have to credit a lot of my colleagues. I am a practicing longevity physician, and I have many colleagues who debate on the gray area of that line, because on the one hand, you've got guideline standard medical care, but that's not enough. Like, to do true longevity care, you need to go beyond that. And then you're reaching into more theoretical advances, doing off-label prescriptions for, for example, GLP-1 agonists and hormone therapy in areas that previously we saw guidelines recommending against. So I have to credit the community of longevity physicians for going against the norm in the medical world. And it's hard to do. Like, being a physician, I'll just say that, like, one of the biggest risks or fears that a physician has is losing their license. And there's a great deal of fear out there by physicians. Like, if I practice in this, so-called gray area way, will my license be taken away? So when you go to your doctor and you ask them for certain things and they say no, know that, at the back of their minds, like, that's one thing that they're considering. So anyways, that's an aside, but how do you tell the difference? I think there's, of course, you can always go to the publications, and even for some of the edgier science, like, say, for example, peptides and hormones, there are studies that do support some of the more frontier edge type medicines, even if they are beyond guidelines. But something that we're working to do, because we are an AI science company at our core, is using AI scientific techniques for analysis. So causal analysis, causal AI, trying to figure out those details of why something happens. Is it just correlation, or is it true causation? We're not there yet, neither us or anybody in the landscape, because this is a world of science that requires a very different kind of data set that doesn't currently exist. But I think that is the future that we need to work towards. It's too much to ask to try and do randomized controlled trials, like double-blinded on everything. That was the old gold standard, but you can't do that in the field of longevity, kind of for obvious reasons. You'd have to wait for people to die, and it would take hundreds of years. So we have to find other ways to find proof, but I think that doesn't excuse us from trying to find theoretical, at least scientific basis. So, as a very small example, like, and this will be the last, I know I'm talking a lot, but I think this is important. As a small example, like, we all generally understand, like, something like NMN or NAD+, it's very popular. It gives people a lot of subjective wellness. And one of the leaders in this field, Dr. Yurth, she's another longevity physician, she spoke on this, and I found it quite insightful. She was saying how, we just think by replacing something that goes away with age, it's beneficial, but we kind of ignore the fact that there might be byproducts or adverse effects that you're not aware of, because this is a fairly new thing. And so for NAD+, for example, you get byproducts that can actually cause harm. And so she has this entire other methodology where she uses, 1-MNA, for example, which is a different modality that reduces the risk of having such byproducts. But that is a level of scientific detail that requires a clinician, a scientist, to really understand the theory behind it, even though there's not like a broad-based, randomized controlled study about this. So I would say, at the end of the day, even if you don't have classic scientific studies, you should apply at least scientific thinking and think really broadly and comprehensively when you're facing a new intervention.
Thanks, Hillary. Let's move towards the business of longevity, from idea to scale. That's the title of the chapter. I first want to talk about investments, and Max, would love to get your your take here. What would you say separates the winners from the rest, and what advice would you give to new founders in the space?
So I contend that there are no winners yet, and there's no great healthcare company that has started in the past 2 decades, right? If we look at every other industry, there's Tesla, multiple trillion-dollar company, there's Apple, there's Nvidia, there's Amazon, there's Uber, there's Airbnb. There's nothing in healthcare, right? There's literally nothing. And I think part of the reason why is, to date, we've reasoned from the past. We've said, oh, this is how we like incrementally iterate on what exists. And I think the reality is that there is no playbook. Yeah, we don't actually know what separates the winners from the losers, so to speak, because there aren't winners. And I think that's really exciting, because the implication is it means that people can come into the industry and be creative and can innovate and can dream. And often dreams will get cut down and people will laugh and people will say, no, that will never work. And that's what they said about the iPod. That's what they said about the mobile phone. That's what they said about self-driving cars, right? They said it will never work. So I think what we need is people who are willing to dream. I think they're going to be laughed at. And I think sometimes they'll be wrong and sometimes it won't work. And maybe one of those things, just maybe, actually ends up being the Apple of healthcare, or the company that fundamentally changes the shape of this industry and the outcomes and the way people engage and feel empowered as part of their health. Now, I know that's not quite the answer you're looking for. So I'll give you the answer you're looking for. I do think that there are some things that can increase the probability of success. The first is being very narrow with your focus area. I see a lot of people come in and say, we want to do everything. And the implication is when you do everything, you don't do anything, and you end up being another services company, right? You end up just building another clinic. So I think the first thing is like being very narrow with the focus. And that's hard because people's ego makes them want to do everything, right? And I think if you do the narrow thing of HIMSS, you get pegged as a pill mill. If you do the narrow thing of function health, you get pegged as a blood test. You do the narrow thing as Prenuvo, you get pegged as just a wrapper on top of an MRI. But I think that it helps to start narrow. That's the first thing. The second thing is to start with what customers want and patients want, right? I think there's a lot of starting with the business model or starting with like some business plan or starting with the health system or the payer. I think that can work. And if you want to build a company like all the other health companies that haven't actually done much, that's awfully important. But I think if we actually want to see a step function change in health, we need to start with what people want. And often we actually feel intuitively what people want. We kind of want it. We look at our own behavior. The catch is that all of the insiders will tell you why that won't work. So I think it's really challenging, but really important to ignore the dogma and start with the fundamental truths of what people want.
Do you think there's a business model that has the more long-term potential?
I think that there are going to be 3 categories of companies in the longevity space, loosely speaking. There are many more, but let's call it 3 categories of companies. One is vertical diagnostic companies. Companies that start by picking a specific diagnostic and wrapping it or owning the full stack end to end and just being known for that thing. That can be a biotech company, which goes all the way down to the lab, or it could be a consumer company, which does distribution on top of a lab. The second category is a vertical therapeutic company. Again, it might be a wrapper on top of an existing therapeutic, or it might be all the way into the biotech world of developing a therapeutic to drive large outcomes. The implication of the vertical diagnostic and the vertical therapeutic is that there's a lot of focus. The company says no to most things in favor of doing one thing very well. The third category of company is what I think of as like a horizontal, like navigator or aggregator style company. In a world where we have lots of diagnostics and lots of therapeutics and lots of innovation, we're still going to, as customers, need something to bring it together. And I don't think we've necessarily seen these companies emerge yet. We kind of have on the B2B side, right? One Medical sort of did it, Transcarent sort of did it. But I think we're actually going to see these, what I call like horizontal health systems or AI doctors or like new primary care models emerge, which are very horizontal. So there are 3 categories. I think there are a few more, but I think most people, my sense is it behooves most people to focus on one of those 3 at the cost of doing everything else.
Thanks, Max. Hillary, would love to hear your tips for other MDs that are stepping into entrepreneurship. in the longevity space, or that want to make longevity a part of their current practices?
Yeah, and general advice. Well, that's almost like a two-part question is one, how to become an entrepreneur, and two is how do you become a longevity physician or precision medicine practitioner? So to address the first one, I think many doctors in the last couple of generations have forgotten the fact that doctors all used to be entrepreneurs. We used to all set up shop and for example, my grandfather, he was in a different country. I'm from Taiwan, but he ran his entire own hospital around OBGYN care. And that's what doctors did for centuries. And now we are actually in an unusual period in history where doctors work for health systems, largely speaking. And that's because of a lot of factors due to consolidation, et cetera. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible to set up shop. And I think I work with many of these concierge physicians who do so. And it's not just concierge, there's also direct primary care, there's more traditional insurance reimbursement type clinics as well, where there's entrepreneurial physicians. It's difficult, and I think there's a lack of community. I love what some of my colleagues, for example, the founders at Off Call, they're doing, or Polyus, his community XPC, which brings together innovative-minded physicians. So this is all important, finding that community, finding the energy to go out on your own, because it is harder today, although it's not impossible. The second piece of it is if you do want to adapt to a more precision longevity practice, you do have to be quite open-minded. And why is because there's both the technology piece. When you're dealing with precision medicine, that means you have infinitely, pretty much, more data to manage. Data from your patients and data from the evidence that you're going to have to read or understand somehow through the use of technology. And the other side of which, of course, is you have to be open-minded to different business model structures. When you are a longevity physician, it means that you have to put yourself out there as the face of your company much of the time. That's how a lot of these clinics become successful. You may also have to adopt a completely different business mindset. For those who believe very strongly that it should be accessible care, that's the DPC model. And for those who believe that their time is worth a lot more money than we're awarded in the healthcare system, then that is more the concierge model. And it enables you to also encompass more in your practice when you're able to charge more. There's limitations to all of the above, which is why we're working on what we're working on with Elevate X. But I think the basic message there is I encourage physicians to really think bigger and to grow their entrepreneurial muscle. Like, go out there and do something, because doctors, by and large, are incredibly smart, talented, hardworking human beings. And I think we're a bit wasted working in traditional roles in large health systems that kind of swallow us up.
Thanks, Hilary. And we'll share those recommendations and the info on the communities that you mentioned. We'll share them with everyone after this, so that you have it handy. I know XPC, and they do a great job kind of just putting everyone in the same room, everyone with a clinical background in the same room. Nate, besides the business, you've built Geviti out of a very personal motivation. So I'd love to for you to share a bit more of what inspired you to build a company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you're right. So as I mentioned, my background is not in healthcare. My background is in technology. I had a small exit in 2021 from a tech platform that I built. And around that time, my father, he started experiencing this lower back pain. And he went through the process. He went to a masseuse, a chiropractor. He went to a primary care physician. And everybody told him he was fine. It was just probably something with his muscles. Well, the pain got worse and worse and worse until eventually he went in to actually go look underneath the hood. And come to find out it was cancer that had spread everywhere, up his back. It started in his lungs, went through his back to his brain, everywhere. And it was so frustrating that we were dismissed. Oh, you're fine. Oh, you're fine. While this cancer was growing and spreading. And ultimately, ultimately it took his life. He ended up passing away at the age of 58 years old, September 8th of 2021. And that's when we started to conceptualize what Geviti was going to be. At the very least, a platform that might allow one person to not experience what it was that I experienced, frankly. Yeah, I mean, what brought me here was kind of the traditional healthcare system letting me down. This was several years ago, and things have since progressed, quite rapidly. At that time, when we first got into the space, there were not, nearly as many companies leveraging really cool artificial intelligence and machine learning models to better care, frankly. This was hardly a discussion. The idea of a AI doctor was science fiction at that point, but now it's becoming obvious that that's where things are trending. And so I knew that we needed to bring some level of more modern technology to this industry. But to touch on one of your questions earlier, what separates the winners from the losers, just briefly, our approach is really thinking super micro to begin. We're truly invested in the lives of each of our members here at Geviti. That's what we call them. We call them members. And I think that's where it all begins. If we save one life, if we help optimize one person's life, then Geviti was a success, frankly. But yes, so that's what led me to the space, the passing of my father. He was too young to die from something that we believe is largely preventable. And frankly, if any of these solutions had existed, or at least were more known about during that time, there's a chance that my father would have caught, the cancer sooner.
That's what I was gonna ask. Thanks for sharing. I think we all know very similar stories that are frustrating and sad. And also moving to the next topic, it feels like AI is kind of bringing some light into this, and at least I feel like it's helping everyone, every normal person that maybe doesn't even have a longevity clinic or a provider that they can go to. We're all using ChatGPT to figure out what's happening to our body. So what do you think? How do you think AI and generative AI and machine learning are going to impact the space?
I mean, it already is impacting the space, right? You've got computer vision algorithms that are already detecting patterns in various medical imaging, and that, frankly, human clinicians would miss. This sort of technology allows you to potentially identify diseases years earlier. We've got multimodal AI systems sort of combining genomic and metabolomic data to predict disease risk, and that's being done at sort of this unprecedented accuracy, which is really, really cool to see. We're already utilizing these AI models. We've got sort of, using what we do is, one of the things we do is reinforcement learning, right? So using reinforcement learning to truly optimize therapeutic protocols by continuously learning from patient responses. As Hillary mentioned earlier, there isn't this universal data set that we can all plug into right now. I think we're all sort of building our own data sets and leveraging what we can that exists out there. But over time, we're going to find that, and it'd be really cool, honestly, if we can all somehow figure out how to come together and democratize this so we can truly advance longevity together. Conversation for another day, but there's just so many really cool different types of artificial intelligence out there. The next frontier, I'd say, which does not really get talked about and is kind of, it really is the next frontier, is like quantum machine learning applications. So quantum machine learning applications for modeling complex protein is something that we should be looking into. There's just so much. This is more of a discovery than it is an invention, right? This new progression of artificial intelligence. So I'm just thrilled over the next decade to see where things go. Things are moving way more rapid than, frankly, I would have expected them to by this point. The advancements in large language models specifically is just, it's insane. But ultimately, we're going to have people living longer, healthier, happier lives because of this.
It's still tricky for physicians and to deliver precision longevity at scale, and AI seems to be falling short in some areas. Hillary, where do you think AI is actually helping, and where is it still falling short?
There was actually a recent study that I just was reading the results from Stanford, where they showed that they were like, wow, AI is, really excellent, perhaps better. They actually did have a study saying like AI was better than doctors, and we're seeing more and more of that in different use cases. So theoretically, AI plus doctors should be even better, right? And that hasn't been the case. And it's because a lot of AI solutions were not built with the physician workflow in mind. And even if they are, because I know there's a lot of these sort of AI assistant, AI scribe type companies out there, you have to figure out how to play nice with existing software, with existing infrastructure. So something we had to make an intentional decision about, because we work with existing clinics. We're not, something that we will do in the future is building de novos, but it's not something we do currently, is how do you play nice with existing infrastructure? And that involves a lot more creativity and customization, actually. And so it's inherently unscalable. And I think that's a big part of why there's a level of a barrier, essentially. Like, folks are trying to build outside the system entirely, which is one tactic. But if you want to build within the system, I think that's a tough thing to break down. And just a quick note why we've chosen to work this way, because a lot of entrepreneurs have made the perhaps smart choice to just build separately from an existing healthcare system, is that my experience with my past company, so Curio was focused on psychedelic assisted mental health care for the severely mentally ill. And it was great in the beginning. We were able to make great impacts. We scaled across several states and helped countless lives. So that was very fulfilling, just as a physician founder. But where we really hit a wall was adoption by the mainstream healthcare system. And I think we've seen that across the board for the ketamine or psychedelic space. And because of that, that entire industry is fundamentally limited. And I believe that we are in a different situation with longevity and precision longevity in general, because health systems do and doctors do want to conduct this type of care. They're just trying to figure out how. And so that's like that unlock that we're trying to provide for them. So I am more optimistic about this movement and industry than the one that I previously was founding in. But I think that it does take a lot of effort and hard work to adapt existing systems. So yeah, it's not a straightforward answer, but I think it has to do with designing within existing workflows and infrastructure.
Thanks, Hillary. And Max, on the past probably 2 years, we've been seeing that every company is an AI company. Many times just to use AI to sound modern and trendy and to get better chances with investors. Many other times because AI is really a core piece of their technology or their product. Do you think AI is a must in the longevity space, or do you think it's still used as a buzzword sometimes?
Like, if you're building a technology company, is the internet a must? Is like the iPhone a must? A data center, like all of that stuff is a must. And I think soon we're not even going to think about AI companies as AI companies. I think that AI will be useful both at the level of the user experience, and it will be able to drive quality at a low cost at the level of a user experience, which means that there's an imperative for every company to adopt it. And then I think it will be used within a company at the operating level, because again, a company that uses it is able to drive quality and speed and cost in a way that other companies cannot. So that's my sense. I think there's one formulation of AI, which is let's take the best of what currently exists and let's copy that at a far lower cost and far faster. I think that's like, okay. I think the more interesting formulation of AI is let's assume that everything we have today is like 4 out of 10. And let's assume that for the first time in history, 4 out of 10 can now get to 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, right? Because AI allows us to not just copy the best of what exists today, but to actually extend beyond that. I still think we're early. And I think people tend to linearly extrapolate these models. And they're like, well, look, AI is not that good today. It can't even like write an article for me. It can't even write an email for me. But I think that misses the point, right? Like this is point in time static. Look at these AI models 2 years ago. They hardly existed. And I think the right extrapolation here is exponential. And I think if we like always ask, okay, so in the limit, what is true of AI? We arrive at the more interesting conclusions. And I think that one thing which is true is that in the limit, AI knows more than us about most things. And as a result, we increasingly have to copy it. We don't really have a choice. It's like an evolutionarily imperative to basically use AI because it can do what humans today cannot do.
How do you see that other digital health tools like wearables, digital biomarkers, frontier therapeutics changing the way we approach aging?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the classic way of diagnosing or getting data was a biological assay, right? Or a big imaging device like an MRI. These things, they take a lot of time, they're really damn expensive, they're error prone. Where we potentially get to is where we are collecting data continuously at all times using always on, zero marginal cost digital devices. And that's the digital diagnostic. It's the ability to use all of the data around us to predict things and to connect dots in novel ways. So I think that trend and theme is still early. And I think we're going to see way more in that place, in that space. I think what we've seen, at least over the course of AI and over the course of data science, is that more data helps. And that typically places where we have large amounts of continuous data, we can do things that would not be possible in more deterministic ways. One example of this is like the TikTok algorithm. No human brain is going to be able to comprehend the TikTok algorithm. We have large amounts of continuous data with zero marginal cost. I think the same is true of healthcare. Wearables, mattresses, cameras and devices around us, cars are going to provide us large amounts of continuous data. And if we extrapolate the trend we see in other industries, whereas that results in magic, like genuinely things which look like magic, I suspect the same could apply to healthcare, but we're still early, so we'll see. On the therapeutic side, I suspect that we'll be slightly more constrained to biology, meaning things that exist in the physical world. I think there's only so much that something purely digital can actually modify human biology. And I suspect that things that modify human biology still exist at the level of a pharmaceutical, a peptide, some sort of hardware therapeutic, a neuromodulating device, something which is implantable within the human body. And I think that is potentially even more interesting than diagnostics. I actually think we get to a world where diagnostics are table stakes, where like preventing disease is table stakes. And in that world, when we've solved like health at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, the next thing is like human enhancement and human evolution. And people laugh at me when I say this. They're like, what do you mean? Who wants to modify their genes? I'm like, well, you think you're going to have a son or daughter, and all of your neighbors, all of them are going to be making their son and daughter smarter and better looking and more athletic, and you're not going to do that? Of course you're going to do it. You're not going to have a choice, right? And I think even if we don't like the fact that this is where the future is heading, the fact that we are a composition of cells that have a survival imperative means that people will actually be forced to adopt these therapeutics. I don't know exactly when this future will come. I suspect it's not anytime soon, but it's way sooner than most people think.
To all of you, how do you think, and do you think longevity will that we will get to a point in which longevity will actually be accessible to everyone, or it is going to remain kind of elite and more for a wealthy niche like now, in which you pay out of pocket, you need to have the wearables, you need to have the technology? What's your take there? Do you think there's a world in which longevity is a bit more equal?
Let me jump in there real quick. Yeah. So first of all, everything Max said is spot on. He's definitely spot on with his analysis and where he sees the future headed. I agree. Whether he's spot on or not, I agree with everything he just said there. Yes, to answer your question, longevity will be accessible to everyone. As artificial intelligence gets better, we will continue to see more abundance across the board. We will see the costs of goods and services go down. We will see things everywhere, not just here in America, progressively become more affordable. And I think you play that trend out over time. Yes, even the most unreached places of the world will have access to these devices, these always-on wearables, as Max put it, that are extrapolating real-time data 24/7 and sending this to an artificial intelligence application to make sense of it and to provide actionable insights and feedback. That will happen, and I think it will happen pretty soon. If I had to guess, it'll happen within the next 20 years, if not sooner than that. And that's really awesome. But it begins with people like such as the ones on this panel who are sort of laying the groundwork for the future of longevity. Medicine is changing. It is definitely becoming more longevity focused, and it's really cool that there's people who are crazy enough to enter the space and innovate and go against the grain, and honestly catch a lot of flack from people who have been in the industry for so long to make longevity accessible, because we all have the same vision. It can be accessible. Artificial intelligence and the driving down of costs because of it as a byproduct of is how we get there.
Thanks, Nate. So moving to in the investment landscape, I'm sure we have a bunch of investors and entrepreneurs in the audience. And Max, Superpower raised 4 million, if I'm not wrong, for your pre-seed. So I would love to get your input on what you think investors are looking for and evaluating in the longevity startup space. If it's about the science, the scalability, the business model, all of the above. What's your take there?
So I don't think 4 million gives us any right to comment. We haven't announced incremental fundraising announced. So we have a little bit more in the bank. My sense is,
congrats.
Let's say someone came along and said, I want to build a self-driving car. Right? We all kind of know that that's a great idea. Like, everyone is going to be in self-driving cars at some point in time. But most people, if they came along and said, I'm going to build a self-driving car, aren't going to get investment. And the reason why is it's really, really hard to build a self-driving car. And I think the implication is that actually what nearly always matters is the team. Right? I think the biggest ideas and the boldest ideas tend to be things which investors are wise enough to be willing to invest in and underwrite. So I don't think the constraint's the idea. I think that really great teams are really rare. And the constraint is nearly always talent. And that's the primary constraint. The second constraint is nearly always strategy. And what I mean by that is, even if you say you want to build a self-driving car, how do you do it? That's what the strategy is. It's the insights you have that others don't have around the specific how. And I think that when you take team and then a clear articulation of the non-obvious insights around how you'll execute, at the earlier stages, most investors will be excited. Then there's a question that will come up, which is like, but I haven't done much in the past. I'm not someone investors will invest in, blah, blah, blah. I think the wisest investors won't index on what someone's done. I actually think that the wisest investors don't put too much weight on credentials. And you can look at this. You can just look at the anecdotes of the companies that have raised and the people that have raised. There are a lot of outsider backgrounds in there. I think that what is surprisingly compelling is the way in which someone thinks, the insights they have, their ability to show that, and their ability to, if an investor is not willing to invest, get the initial proof points required. And I think a lot of people think of the initial proof points as like customers and revenue. I think there's a lot of other ways of hacking the initial proof points, which look more like look more like brand and narrative and people who are also around the table. So I'd say team is the most important, then the quality of someone's thinking, then the proof points, in that order.
Max, I was checking the questions that we received when people registered, and one question was if you could share what's distinctly unique about Superpower, what differentiates you guys to other folks in the category.
I don't think anyone is building quite what we're building behind the scenes. And I think that what we're doing, it goes back to what I said at the start, which is that our belief is that every single person will have an AI doctor, right? Every single person will have a healthcare super app on their phone. It's inevitable. In the limit, it is true, and it's the primary way people engage with their health. Before ChatGPT, before Google, before their doctor, people could already go to Google before the doctor, before their doctor. And that's true. That's like true. And if a company creates that front door to healthcare, you end up building something really important. You end up building a health partner for someone. The hard part is like, how do you actually execute against that? Right? That's the proverbial self-driving car. And I think that the primary input into being able to execute well against that is going to be team. And it's really, really hard to find people who are brilliant enough to execute against something which is non-obvious and no one has done before. And that's what we obsess at. Like if I look at the technical team, 5 of the people on our team are former Y Combinator founders, all exit, just in the engineering team, right? And that similar level of talent applies across the rest of the org. And if you're trying to do something great, I think it primarily comes down to having really, really great people.
To all of you, do you have any lessons or hard truths that you'd like to share for people trying to scale a company or fundraise?
Well, I'll touch on the fundraise. So we haven't taken any venture money, but we have raised close to 10 million to date. And we went about it in maybe a more unorthodox way than others might. We didn't go to venture capital. We actually got with strategic partners, people who are in verticals that frankly can help us scale better and help us drive down the costs of goods and services more. And that's where we went for fundraising. And what you get with that is a really good partner who actually is in your space and who lives and breathes sort of the same air that you're breathing. And so don't feel like you have to necessarily go, the only way to raise capital is through venture capital. It's not the only way. There's other ways you can get creative. We really like doing convertible notes. A lot of people like safes. There's many ways to, raise, of course. And then I would just caution, like, you are coming into a brand new space. There is no winner yet, as Max said earlier. And you're kind of crazy to build a startup to begin with. You're even crazier to build a health tech startup. Just to be frank, I'm not saying you shouldn't. We need people who do. We need founders. Founders are how the world changes for the better. But what I've noticed is you're stepping into a world of academia, and that's really cool in some facets. For myself, I'm a technical guy. I'm not a scientist, so for me, I find it really difficult in other instances. Sort of to Max's point, one of the cool things that we do is everybody I bring on to Geviti is smarter than me or better than me at the role that they're fulfilling. That has to be a requirement. And if you can operate that way, not just that way, but when that person is ready for support, whoever they bring on, a requirement is they must be smarter than them in whatever, facet that might be, so on and so forth. And so it's one thing to build a really awesome, talented founding team. It's harder to not let that talent drop off as you get bigger. And that's sort of why it's a prerequisite in our hiring process. You got to make sure that they're frankly better than you and know that your position is secure and it's not a threat. This is for not only the greater good of the company, but frankly, not to sound sanctimonious or overly altruistic, but for humanity. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Awesome. We have 4 minutes left, and I want to move to the questions that we have. So guys, if you go to Q&A, you can see all the questions that we have, and if you type on answer live, you can, the question will pop up. So I will start with the first one. Will this be recorded and available afterwards? Yes, we'll send this over. So any of you that wants to answer a question, just tap on answer live. Hilary, I know there's one that's specifically for you. So
Sure. Thank you, Xavier. So question is, what does it mean to you to transform existing practices to precision longevity medicine? So fantastic question, because it's a very nuanced answer. So first is mindset and approach, or what you might call your branding, which is you have to start thinking about medicine in this proactive, preventative way, but also in a highly individualized or precision way. A lot of doctors aren't used to that because we have to, in traditional primary care models, for example, it's like this revolving door of, 4 to 8 visits an hour. So you really have to take a moment and shift culturally. And then the second piece is operational. So you need to revise your entire business model and sometimes your entire operations team, which is very hard for a lot of physician owners who are the one and only entrepreneur in the room in their clinic. But that is a task that is necessary if you want to build this type of clinic. You need different talent sometimes, or different approaches and workflows. And then the third is outfitting your infrastructure, as in your technology. That's everything from your software. In longevity, there is some hardware, but you can pick or choose whether you want to include them. You can outsource a lot of the testing. You don't have to have it in-house in longevity, and I think that might be smart for most physicians to do. But long story short, it means first and foremost a big mindset or culture change.
we probably have time for 1 or 2 more answers. So Max, Nate, do you want to pick?
Yeah, I like
one each?
I like the question that just came in. What's the difference between performance, lifestyle, and longevity medicine? Of course, again, disclaimer, background's not in medicine here. This is probably a better question for Hilary, but how we define longevity medicine, again, we've kind of established there's no hard definition for that yet, right? So we sort of view it as this sort of intersection between what people call functional medicine and regenerative medicine. That's how we define longevity medicine. So sort of each of those points, performance, lifestyle, and longevity medicine, it's all one thing. Longevity medicine is sort of all encompassing, right? It's not just peptides and stem cells. It's not just supplementation and root cause care. It's this all encompassing sort of data driven, very precise approach to addressing your body's needs and sort of augmenting your physiology in a way that does in fact enhance lifespan. So I'd say, to answer your question, it's all encompassing. And like at Geviti, and I'm sure elsewhere, there's not really much differentiation for members between them. The way we go about it is we are looking at the full picture, starting with very comprehensive lab work, and we are hitting performance, we're hitting lifestyle, we're hitting each of those facets that would be defined as longevity medicine.
Thanks, Nate. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. It always happens, but I want to thank you all, Hilary, Nate, Max, for joining us and for all your insights, and everyone who joined and questions. We'll be sending over the recording and might be answering some of the questions that you sent on the forum and on the chat that we didn't get the time to comment on. And remember to register to DHI for all the future roundtables and all the awesome content that DHI is creating. So until the next one, and thank you all.